Today, America's foreign policy leaders are all over in Europe at the Munich Security Conference, where we've been seeing Donald Trump's infamous merit-based hiring play out in all its glory this week. When Pete Hegseth, the Fox News weekend morning host who promised to quit drinking when he became Secretary of Defense, read a statement that appeared to reverse basically 70 years of U.S. foreign policy.
We must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. That said, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
After all hell broke loose, Hegseth was forced to make a new statement the next day.
I want to be clear about something as it pertains to NATO membership not being realistic outcome for negotiations. That's something that was stated as part of my remarks here, as part of a coordination with how we're executing these ongoing negotiations, which are led by President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do.
Wait. You're there. You're the Secretary of Defense. You set a policy as the Secretary of Defense working for the president. Now you're like, no, we'll see what Trump does. This all seems to have been a bit much for the senior Republican senator who actually chairs the Armed Services Committee, who called Hegseth's original speech a rookie mistake, adding, I don't know who wrote that speech. It's the kind of thing Tucker Carlson could have written, and Carlson is a fool. And all this was before J.D. Vance attacked our European allies and Donald Trump tried to shake down Ukraine for U.S. support. John Brennan served as director of the CIA, and he joins me now. First of all, Mr. Brennan, what do you think about, Hegseth? Also, in addition to what he said about Ukraine, he basically said we're not going to be a guarantor of European security, which was the real kind of 70-year break with the kind of global NATO order. That also seems to have been walked back. J.D. Vance seems to be sending some sort of cleanup contradictory messages. What do you understand about what U.S. policy here actually is?
I wish I could tell you, Chris, but it's been quite clear, I think, from ever since Hegseth's nomination was announced, that he is unqualified and lacks the experience to be the Secretary of Defense. And it was demonstrated quite visibly on the world stage in Munich. And so, again, I think it just underscores that he is way out of his league right now in terms of trying to represent the U.S. Defense Department with our foreign counterparts. But even more fundamentally, I think what we're seeing now with all of these different statements and conflicting statements, that there's a real lack of coordination within the Trump administration on these very important policies. Previously, in previous administrations, for something like the Munich Security Conference, you would have a lot of pre-event meetings, discussions, and coordination about what the policy statements are going to be. That doesn't seem to have happened here. And so therefore, I think it really is leaving a lot of our allies and partners scratching their heads about what really is the U.S. policy. And it seems to be very ad hoc, that they're making it up as they go along, and they have to reverse course and change tack or whatever. So again, it's been an embarrassment, I think, the past couple of days in terms of what U.S. officials have been doing in Munich and beyond.
One thing that does seem clear, there's a few things that seem clear. One is Trump is going to have some sort of negotiation with Putin that Zelensky may or may not be involved in, or the degree to which he's involved is as yet to be determined. Maybe it's going to happen in Saudi Arabia, of all places. And it also seems, and this has been consistent, there's a lot of reporting that basically what Trump is saying to Zelensky is you have to give us something, including access to precious minerals in Ukraine, including rare earth, which is used for a lot of industrial processes used to make batteries and other things, and being very frank about it, like essentially saying we're going to take a payment here from you or else. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it just demonstrates that the Trump administration is going to use whatever tool it can to intimidate, to threaten others. The Trump administration is coming across as very arrogant, self-centered, and is going to push for its interests, irrespective of the interests of our partners and allies. And that's why I think there's just, real question marks about what is it that is going to come out of this if we're going to be shaking down the Ukrainian government. The fact that the Treasury Secretary of the United States appears in Zelensky's office with a draft contract basically giving the United States 50% of the rare earth minerals in Ukraine. It demonstrates, I think, the lack of sophistication and their ignorance about what the geopolitical realities are there. And so therefore, I think there's a lot of questions. I was in Europe earlier this week, and I must tell you that the frustration and anger with the United States has never been more palpable. It's off the scale because they really just see that there's been such a reverse, a 180 reverse of what the United States has stood for, especially in terms of European security, that this Trump administration has a much different attitude and approach that really is quite off-putting to them.
Finally and quickly, you were at the CIA, director of CIA, you were station chief in Saudi Arabia. I have to ask you, since I have you here, about the president's now repeated declarations that we're going to take over Gaza, occupy it in some way, remove all 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to create some real estate development deal that will be owned by the U.S. And what that does to American security and counterterrorism and intelligence in the region.
Well, that very statement, I think, is exceptionally dangerous because basically we're telling 2 million Palestinians, we're not only going to ignore your right to self-determination, we're going to kick you out of your homeland that you've been in for many, many generations. And so, therefore, I think it really is quite dangerous. There was a writer who wrote about this who referred to this as just sheer lunacy. It is sheer lunacy. It doesn't grasp the underlying concerns and issues that really have been the source of this problem for so many years. And so, the thought that the United States is just going to take over Gaza, push out all Palestinians, and turn it into a Riviera on the Mediterranean is just totally absurd. But again, I think it is very dangerous because it is engendering now a real feeling of animosity among a lot of individuals who are there toward the United States that is not going to go away.
John Brennan, thank you for your time tonight, sir. Appreciate it.
You might have seen Elon Musk making a speech at a big international conference this week in which he wore a T-shirt that said tech support. It's not a flattering look, but he thought it was hilarious. He tried to say this T-shirt was a very funny joke, that he's White House tech support. You know, for our generation of Howard Phillipses, our generation of the let's kill the U.S. government and we don't care if it's legal or not. Our guys have claimed the right to do what they're doing, not just because of their wild-eyed zeal against the U.S. government and the U.S. system of governing. They've claimed the right to do this. They've sort of claimed that their legitimacy comes from their tech savvy, because they're so good with computers. So we're all supposed to, get out of their way, or we're supposed to be intimidated or at least confused by what exactly they're doing because, wow, it's such a high level, right? It's so high tech. They're so tech savvy, so competent, so good at what they're doing. How could we mere mortals possibly understand? 404 Media today reported that on the website for Doge, I don't know, Doge, I don't know, whatever we're supposed to call it, on their own website that Elon Musk's agency-destroying group has set up for themselves. It appears that random members of the public have been able to upload joke categories and database entries onto that website that show up as if they are official Doge.gov data. And people can add random stuff to this website, not because there's like a post your public comment here section, but because apparently when Doge designed this website for itself, they didn't know how, or they forgot to make the website secure so other people couldn't post random stuff on it. 404 Media reporting today that people were posting things like, quote, these experts left their database open, ruh-roh, and quote, this is a joke of a .gov site. Remember, these are our high-tech overlords. At the Huffington Post today, they've got comment from an unnamed employee of the Defense Intelligence Agency pointing out that among the data that Elon Musk's little group has posted online on their apparently totally insecure, half-baked website is classified information. about the National Reconnaissance Office, which is the federal agency that designs, builds, and maintains U.S. intelligence satellites. Quote, DOJ just posted secret, no foreign, meaning nobody who's not a U.S. national is supposed to see it, no foreign info on their website. Currently, people are scrambling to check if their info has been accessed. This comes on the heels of Elon Musk telling reporters in the Oval Office that we should all be shocked, the American people should be shocked by the scandalous discovery he and his high-tech team made while apparently pawing through Social Security records and data in that part of the government's guts. Because he's allowed to do that, I guess. He said the scandal that he and his team had uncovered in Social Security data is that there are people in the Social Security database who are listed as being 150 years old. And we don't know exactly what Mr. Musk was talking about because he's seeing stuff that I think he's not allowed to see, and neither are we. But today, people started gingerly asking if perhaps Mr. Musk just didn't know that in an older version of the programming language that is used by the Social Security Administration, when you didn't have a date to enter in a particular field, it would code it as 150 years ago. It would code it as 1875. The year 1875 is essentially an error message to let you know that there isn't a real date in that record, and so you should treat that as an error and find out what went wrong. Does he know that? Or does he really think those are records for 150-year-old people? Does he know what he's looking at when he's pawing through your Social Security records? Remember, it's their technical prowess and know-how that's supposed to impress us and make us think this is somehow different than when a far-right, power-mad, doomed president tried to do this exact same thing in 1973. We're supposed to be intimidated here. That measles outbreak we told you about last night in West Texas, it has now doubled in size as of today. The CDC also has fired as many as 1,300 people today. The intelligence staff at the Department of Energy sent its staff an urgent warning about how to respond to Elon Musk's team seeking access to sensitive classified materials about nuclear weapons. And at the National Nuclear Security Administration today, which is responsible for keeping our nukes safe, they fired a significant portion of their staff today, hundreds of staff members. Yesterday, we got word that Trump and Musk's little squad of genius web developers and software engineers, the folks who may have accidentally posted the classified information on their website and left open some sort of back door so that random members of the public can post stuff on it. That genius squad has now reportedly been sent into the IRS. So now that group is in there with your tax information. While tonight we get word that at the IRS, just ahead of tax filing season, they are about to fire thousands, maybe 9,000 people who actually work there to handle your taxes. The combination of the smash and grab by the supposedly high-tech team and the mass firing of people who actually do know what they're doing means real material harm is being done to our country. And it will take a long time to repair it when we finally get to start.
Andrew, thank you for being with us. This is quite something. This is a story that started about Eric Adams, maybe a story a lot of Americans weren't really covering. Guy who got himself into a whole lot of hot water and was facing charges, into a showdown about justice and fairness and politics. I have to say, this has blown up in the last 48 hours in a way that I didn't expect.
Well, absolutely. This is something that doesn't happen at the Department of Justice in any normal times. You just do not see the resignation of career person after career person after career person. Everyone has analogized this, I think, correctly to the Saturday Night Massacre. But one thing I'd like to focus on is that last piece that you read, which was the former heads of the Southern District of New York talking about the department's intent to do this investigation of Danielle Sassoon and other people, this is what I think is going to happen, or at least this is what I'm keeping my eye out for. The judge who has this case and now has the motion to dismiss has the power to hear from the parties. And there is a stark contrast between what Danielle Sassoon says happened and what Emile Beauvais happens. And that judge has the ability to call everyone in. He can even put them under oath. It is a crime to lie to a federal judge, as it should be. And he can, if he makes a determination that Emile Beauvais has put forth fictitious and misleading reasons for what he is doing, and Danielle Sassoon is right, he would both be protecting her rightly from any investigation and getting to the bottom of what appears to be really a quid pro quo deal here. And so the judge has enormous power here to do the right thing and to get to the bottom and accord everyone their due process rights in doing that, because everyone has the ability, to be heard and to cross-examine before the judge makes a decision.
Explain to me, at any point, prosecutors can choose not to prosecute something. The Department of Justice can decide not to do something. But there's some question about why this all came about. Emile Beauvais' letter to Danielle Sassoon and teams suggests that these charges were political in nature and they interfered in the fact that Eric Adams was running for election again and the things that he needed to do. Tom Homan suggests this is a deal to get an agreement, as he calls it, to get Eric Adams to do the administration's bidding as it relates to immigration. Talk to me about the legality of any of that. Under which circumstances would it have been fine for the Department of Justice to say we're not prosecuting anything this anymore, versus what is not good about this?
Sure. So, you could have a case where a new administration comes in and says, you know what, we looked at the law you're relying on, and we disagree in your interpretation of the law. Second, a new administration or any new prosecutors could look at a case and say, you know what, we re-examine the facts here, and we don't think you factually can meet all of the elements of the crime. We don't think you can prove it. So that would be basing your decision on your assessment of the law and your assessment of the facts. We know that is not what happened here, because Emile Beauvais, in his letter to Danielle Sassoon and directing that this case be dismissed, said, I am not in any way disagreeing with your assessment of the law and the facts. By the way, that is the only thing that you should be looking at, and whether this case should be brought and should be done. And of course, by the way, when you're indicting the mayor of the city of New York, you're going to be really careful about that. Instead, you have, I think, in my opinion, a lot of bogus reasons, and also reasons that have changed over time, given by Emile Beauvais as to why he thinks this case should be dismissed. And it flies in the face of Danielle Sassoon's point, which is that this really is, as she says, tantamount to a quid pro quo. And that's the kind of thing that a judge can say, you know what, there's a conflict. I have two sides saying different things, and that's what I'm here for. You want to dispute what she's saying? Let's all come on in. You can swear under oath what happened. And by the way, bring those notes that you were so concerned that her people were taking, that you didn't want anyone to see, apparently. Why don't you keep those and give them to me so I can see what people wrote down contemporaneously? So I think that's the thing I think people should keep an eye out for, because here you have a part of the government that is the judiciary, that is separate from the White House, that has an ability to be a real check on the kind of abuse of power that we are seeing going on at the Department of Justice.
Andrew, thank you for your analysis tonight. It's really important. Andrew Weissmann, former FBI General Counsel, former Chief of the Criminal Division in the Eastern District of New York. Joining us now is the Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. I want to just pick up on this conversation. What Andrew is getting at is that on the law and the facts, nothing should have changed with respect to the prosecution of Eric Adams. He had not had a trial yet, and if there were issues that he had to bring up about unfair prosecutions, he was going to have an opportunity to do that. This is motivated by politics. This is motivated by loyalty to President Trump. It's the opposite. If you go against Donald Trump, they're investigating you, and if you actually are on Donald Trump's side for whatever he needs you for, investigations against you will disappear.
Right. Well, Mayor Eric Adams went down to Mar-a-Lago on January 16th and 17th, and that's where they struck their corrupt bargain. Remember, Eric Adams is the subject of a criminal indictment in New York. The U.S. attorney assembled an overwhelming case of corruption against him in terms of his dealings with the Egyptian government. And a grand jury, based on probable cause, handed down an indictment against him. And the Department of Justice, working directly at the behest of Donald Trump, said, we will withdraw this indictment. We will get this indictment killed using our power to do so. And you just join our political team and you go along with what we want. And that is a corrupt and illegal bargain. And it's saturated with corruption because the case is about corruption. It was a corrupt bargain that was made to kill it. And then they had to go through the Department of Justice, where they ended up forcing out all of these prosecutors who resigned, including the very conservative U.S. attorney in the Southern District, who was a Scalia clerk, a Federalist Society person, and the head of the criminal division of DOJ. All of these lawyers saying this is absolutely antithetical to our oath of office. But the thing that gets me, Ali, is that this is completely reflective and emblematic of what's going on in this administration. Although they're mouthing all these pieties about going out to find waste, fraud, and abuse, that is just an utter illusion and an irrelevant distraction from what's really going on. The whole administration is about promoting corruption. The first thing they did was they got rid of 17 inspector generals in the federal departments and agencies. These are the anti-corruption fighters, and they have staffs of hundreds of people who are actually working to ferret out waste and corruption and self-dealing and bribery and abuse. And last year, they saved us $93 billion. Elon Musk hasn't saved us $93 in waste, fraud, and abuse. What he's doing is firing people, civil service workers like air traffic controllers, like FBI agents who did their jobs with respect to the January 6th investigation, like food and drug safety inspectors. That's who they're going after. That's not corruption. That's not waste, fraud, and abuse. So that thing is a fraud. They continue to wipe out the anti-corruption infrastructure of government. For example, they said they're not going to enforce the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act anymore. They've attacked the Public Integrity Division in the Department of Justice. The first thing they did was to fire the person who was in that office. And so you go agency by agency, department by department. What they're doing is demolishing the anti-corruption infrastructure so they can insert corruption where it once was.
And it's, as you know, as a lawyer, Eric Adams has denied the charges. He says he's not guilty of that. As Andrew Weissmann says, if you're going to pursue charges against a mayor, the SDNY was going to make sure that they had as solid a case as they could. But no one's been to a trial yet. They would actually have to prove this in trial. So if Eric Adams' big beef was that these charges were unfair, which a lot of people who are charged say, he would have had his day or days in court. I think it's interesting to see that these lawyers, lawyer after lawyer after lawyer, these prosecutors, federal prosecutors, again, these are conservatives, are prepared to go ahead with stepping down, with resigning and writing these scathing letters to say, this is not right. This is not what our system is supposed to be. In a world where we're all looking for our footing on how to fight back against this, I think that was pretty encouraging.
Well, look, these people are real lawyers, and they're very solid and honorable prosecutors, because they said what we base a prosecutorial judgment on is the facts of the case and then what the law is. And they went through all of that, and they said that it met the very stringent test of probable cause, the same test that a grand jury in New York used to hand it down. So what changed? There were no new facts. There was no new law adopted. The law didn't change. What changed was Donald Trump's interest in the case and bringing winning over Mayor Adams to his side politically, and he was willing to trade off the justice system in the United States. And these people are saying no way. But I just want everybody to see this is what is taking place across the government now. They claim they are opponents of corruption. They are all agents of corruption, and corruption has always been at the heart of authoritarianism. We can either have government that is going to be an instrument for the common good for everybody and for democratic institutions, or it's going to be an agent of corruption for small groups of people, like the unelected billionaire bureaucrat who's been busy squashing cases against him in numerous federal agencies and departments, because a lot of them had investigative actions going against Elon Musk, and he's been able to take over those departments. And, well, you know, they disappear while he continues to rake in billions of dollars from federal taxpayers as a government contractor.
This is an interesting point you make. The New York Times has done some excellent reporting on this. The number of government agencies that Elon Musk and his friends now have access to that had investigations into business interests and things that Elon Musk was doing. That's a bit weird. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland.
I have a story that's just crossed our wires here from my colleagues. They're reporting this, that the Trump administration has suggested to Ukraine that U.S. be granted 50% ownership of that country's rare earth minerals, and signaled an openness to deploying American troops there to guard them, the minerals, once there's a deal with Russia to end the war. That is according to 4 U.S. officials. The U.S. may not pay Ukraine for the minerals, 2 officials said. Rather, an ownership agreement would be a way for Ukraine to reimburse the U.S. for the billions of dollars in weapons and support it's provided Kyiv since the war began. Trump said he wants the U.S. to get $500 billion of Ukraine's rare earth minerals. John Hallman.
Now, look, Trump's trying to do something. He's going to try to solve the Russia-Ukraine war by doing some kind of weird strip mining, like land management deal. I don't know.
Can we put a pin in the minerals and just go to the U.S. troops? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this week that U.S. troops would not be deployed to Ukraine as part of security guarantees. The Wall Street Journal reported Friday that Vance said in an interview that the U.S. sending troops to Ukraine is on the table if Russia does not negotiate a peace agreement. We're now sending troops to Ukraine to protect minerals?
I don't know, but I will say that there's this echoes with a thing that I read or heard someplace in the last couple of days about Trump's increasingly serious interest in trying to annex Canada being about the minerals that Canada has. The mineral thing, somehow some weird minerals are in Trump's water right now, or there's some economist in his ear who's telling him about, you know,
I doubt it's an economist.
Right.
It's just a donor.
Some of those weird, there's some, you know, it's like the kind of economists who are like gold bugs.
Crypto
nut. They are like these, you know, they say, you know, Peter Navarro was an economist, right? In theory? No?
I don't know.
I don't remember. Anyway, it's the kind of thing you would hear in Trump's economic circle, you know?
Alex, I mean, you just wrote a whole book about Trump. There was so 9 years ago to debate whether to take him literally or figuratively. He's now the country's commander in chief, and this is a serious story by serious journalists, the most deadly serious journalists at this network, about Trump sending troops to Ukraine and stealing their minerals.
Yeah, and here's the thing. And if you look at, and I know you guys were talking about the Eric Adams matter earlier, but he, at this point in his career, Trump at this point in his career, he feels emboldened. He feels like he got away with a number of different things. When you look at the campaign, indicted 4 times, he has been impeached a couple times. There were a couple of assassination attempts on him. And if you look at where he is right now, he feels sort of invincible at this point. And so no matter what the coverage looks like, no matter how much criticism he gets for his moves, he feels like he just wants to go and plow ahead. And so maybe he'll get criticism for this, maybe not, but it doesn't necessarily bother him at this point. And so you've seen a number of moves over the last month that have been stunning, that have been outside the norms, but that doesn't necessarily bother him.
Is it legal?
I mean, it doesn't matter if it bothers him. He's not going to be able to do that. I mean, there's certainly stuff they're doing right now that courts have said they can't, right? And maybe they've stopped doing it, and maybe they haven't, and we don't know. And that's the big question: are we hurtling towards a constitutional crisis? Yeah. But you know, this is more than just being emboldened. Like, this is not okay. You know, this stuff is so beyond the norm. And in fact, like we're seeing multiple different walkbacks. Remember last week he said he was going to send troops to Gaza.
Oh, right, paving Gaza.
Yeah.
Alex, when you named the book Revenge, did you think it would be the animating principle of a presidency in this country?
To some extent, yes. He made it pretty clear for a while that he wanted revenge on a lot of people. He spent the midterms of 2022 going after people like Liz Cheney. He spent a lot of time going after the judge. A lot of his focus has been on people who've crossed him. And so it only made sense that once he got into power, he would use his power to go after people that he didn't like. And so you talk about people like John Bolton, you talk about people like General Milley. It really only made sense that he would use his power to find ways to get back at them. And so in that respect, his decision to strip their security wasn't all that surprising.
As Vice President J.D. Vance prepared to speak to European leaders at the Munich Security Conference today, many of those leaders were likely expecting to hear about the Ukraine war and the importance of unity between allies. Instead, what they got was this.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within. The retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration.
With me tonight, former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts. He's the general manager for Microsoft's Threat Analysis Center and an MSNBC national security analyst, and Nayyera Haq, former White House senior director and former State Department senior advisor. My thanks to both of you. Clint, you're in Munich. Thank you for joining us. I'm almost scared to ask. I feel like I'm going to be embarrassed for America in asking, what was the reaction to Vance's speech?
I think the tone in general, Katie, is just remarkably different than last year. I was here a year ago, and that's when Alexei Navalny was killed in Russia. And the tone was very much, let's rally around the Ukrainians. Let's rally around those who are opposing Russia. And very much different this year. It is, are we a unity, a group of countries aligned against Russia and other interests? Instead, what we heard in that speech, and just across the board, is really a focus on what would be considered internal domestic politics. It felt more like a political campaign speech than it did really about a national security issue per se. So wildly different perspectives. I think for the Europeans, it's a bit of whiplash between like last year, looking back 3 years ago, where we're really unifying and rallying around Ukraine, to a perspective that is much more about domestic politics in each of these countries and what the outcomes of different campaigns might be.
You know, Nayyera, though, you get this 1-2 punch of Pete Hegseth, you got J.D. Vance, and this is the first opportunity for Trump 2.0, the second administration, to show our allies how we're going to approach Europe. It's got to leave a bad taste in any type of ally's mouth when they see and they hear the messaging that's coming out of this administration.
Well, there's a couple of things our allies get from us right now, and they're getting that the United States is not a consistent partner, and that's dangerous in the long run. Now, they did anticipate that Trump would sell out Ukraine, probably not this quickly, but they also probably did not anticipate that the Trump administration would actively weigh into their domestic politics. J.D. Vance also talked about how, the need to speak for the will of the people. He completely ignored the elected leader of Germany in favor of meeting with the far-right opposition group. So apparently, elections matter as the will of the people only when Trump and people he likes around the world win. Bringing up this idea of migration, there's another irony there. Germany actually welcomed Syrian migrants to the tune of 1 million because they had a massive labor shortage. So we're seeing this idea of migrants, brown people moving across borders coming up as a very scary, demonized tactic, when the reality is it's a significant labor challenge for many countries, including in the United States. That's why people are coming and are employed. And until the economics of that get addressed, the Trump administration walking around talking with bravado and as if this is only about national identity, that's going to be truly disruptive to the American economy.
You know, Clint, something else that J.D. Vance said in his speech that I really want our viewers who are tuning in to understand and to be aware about is Vance scolded countries for shunning parties, as Nayyirah just mentioned, that are seen as extreme. And then Vance went a step further by actually meeting with the leader of the AfD. The AfD is the German far-right party, and he meets with this leader 1 week ahead of Germany's own election. Let's be clear, this is a party that was kicked out of a group of European far-right parties for being too extreme. This is who America's representatives choose to break bread with? This is who they choose to spend time with?
Yeah, Katie, it's a very different approach. As was just said, usually you meet with the elected leaders, and that's what's a little bit contradictory around the speech and some of the engagements here is you meet with the elected leaders of these countries. It's still a few weeks, 2 weeks essentially, until we know the outcome of the election. And even then, it would be maybe normal or okay to meet with a variety of different political leaders, but you would definitely want to meet with Schultz while you're here. Those are the elected leaders, and those are the ones contributing to the fight to the Ukraine. So if there's anything I can say about Munich Security Forum, this is the place where all the parties come together that are supporting Ukraine right now. President Zelensky, this is a key forum for him and for Ukraine to gain support, maintain that support, and continue the fight. In terms of the negotiations in Moscow, essentially between Vladimir Putin and President Trump, the idea is that they are negotiating without the European partners. They're doing it without Ukraine. This is really seen as a very much a slap in the face, I think, here at the conference by all the European partners. They want to know, why are we left out when we are the ones that are closest to this ongoing conflict? We're the ones that are trying to support President Zelensky. And why aren't we involved in any of these discussions at all?
Nayyirah, really quickly, I have to ask, Trump officials pitching to Zelensky, hey, if the U.S. owns 50% of Ukraine's rare earth minerals, we'll think about actually, bringing in U.S. troops. I mean, you're having this offer of having American troops guard Ukraine if they reach a deal on these rare minerals?
Well, there's certainly the Trumpian aspect of everything is a real estate opportunity, right? Whether it's Gaza or Ukraine. And then the second part that goes back to the challenge of America on the world stage, the idea that America went to war for Iraq over oil. This just reeks of that all over again. This idea that America is using its military for its own benefit and transactional and not for the betterment of the world.
Clint Watts, Nayyirah Haq, it's so good to see you both. Thank you. And when we return, Stephanie Ruhle is back. She sits down with author Kevin Feige.
38 past the hour, new developments in the reshaping of the federal government by President Trump and his allies. Overnight, the Veterans Affairs Department announced it has let go of more than 1,000 employees. Also overnight, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to unfreeze foreign aid spending that President Trump had suspended. This comes as Elon Musk, who runs the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, says it's time to, quote, delete entire federal agencies.
We do need to delete entire agencies as opposed to leave part of them behind. Because if you leave part of them behind, it's easy. It's kind of like if leaving a weed. If you don't remove the roots of the weed, then it's easy for the weed to grow back. But if you remove the roots of the weed, it doesn't stop weeds from ever growing back, but it makes it harder.
As Musk made those comments, 14 states filed a lawsuit against President Trump. Musk and DOGE saying Musk's authority at DOGE is unconstitutional. With us now is New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres, one of the lead plaintiffs in that lawsuit. I thank you very much for being with us this morning. What's the premise of your lawsuit?
Well, we keep hearing from our constituents who ask every single day how an unelected billionaire has access to their private information, how he can cut off payments to American farmers, how he can propose to delete entire federal agencies. And the short answer is he can't. It's unlawful. It's unconstitutional. and the lawsuit that we filed yesterday is centered on the appointments clause. It is really a centerpiece of the separation of powers that's built into our governmental structure to make sure that the control of the federal government is not placed in the hands of a single unelected, unvetted person like Elon Musk.
But Elon Musk was put in there by President Trump, who was elected. And tell me a little bit more about the appointments clause. What is that and the impact of that?
Well, I think you hit on exactly a very important point. This all stems from President Trump's misunderstanding of the nature of the presidency. He seems to think it operates more like a monarchy than a president that operates within strict limitations of a constitutional republic. The president doesn't have the authority to take someone, put them in charge of the digital services office in the executive branch, which was formerly responsible for making sure such important things as websites worked and information technology systems worked, and convert that into a department of everything, and place at the head of that department someone who has not been submitted to the advice and consent process of the United States Senate. Now, the president may think this is a demonstration of his political strength. It's actually a sign of his weakness. He has allies in control of Congress. He has a legitimate constitutional avenue for changing and reshaping the executive branch, but it requires the difficult process of persuading the representatives in Congress to enact that policy. If he is unable to do that because they are not going to buy into the drastic cuts, the deletion of federal agencies, then that's a limitation on his power that is a feature of our constitutional system, not a defect.
And so what is your state's legal standing in this?
Our citizens have been hurt, but the state itself has been hurt. We have seen cuts to and disruptions in services to a number of programs that are impacted by DOJ's activities. We have serious concerns about the impact to the privacy interests of our citizens. And when we share information with the federal government for the purposes of the distribution of federal resources, we do so with an implicit understanding that that information will be safeguarded and that somebody like this is not going to have access to information or the authority to initiate dramatic and unprecedented changes to the way in which the government functions. Mr. Musk comes from a place where the motto is to move fast and break things. That doesn't work for the government. It's dangerous, it's stupid, and it's unconstitutional.
New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres, thank you very much for being with us today. Appreciate it.